have actually a director's cut, a deleted scene, an alternate ending, whichever one you want. It's all the same. There's this hermit living in the Appalachian Mountains, and he has his 3 puppies. But they're not puppies, they're like big dogs, big hunting dogs. Now, he's up in the Appalachians, he's just a dude hanging out. Imagine he probably has a beard and a sawed-off shotgun and a hatchet, and he's just making ends meet up there. So, like walking through the woods. He's got his 3 puppies behind him, 3 big old puppies. They're actual dogs, because if I keep calling them puppies, what happens to them is quite grim. He's walking with his 3 dogs through the forest, and he's looking for something to eat, and the dogs are like, oh, my stomach hurts. And he's like, whoa, that's weird. You guys talk? And they're like, I mean, woof. They're walking through the woods. This is not going to go well. They're walking through the woods, and he sees a rabbit, and he's like, oh, this is dope, dude. And he loads up his shotgun. I don't know why I used both blasts, but anyways, the rabbit is smeared across the forest. He's like, oh, I probably should have just used my rifle. He picks up what's left of the rabbit, eats some of it, feeds the rest to his dogs, and then he's like, I need more food than that. And he starts eyeing his dogs, and he's like, which dog has the most meat on him? But before he can answer that question, he sees a long black tail sticking out of the bushes, apparently, somewhere. He doesn't see what it's attached to, he just sees a long tail. And it's going. And he's like, that's weird, I didn't know tails made noises. So he sneaks up on whatever it is. I don't know why he just didn't open fire on whatever was attached to the tail. But he sneaks up and he has his hatchet. He's watching the tail kind of... Now it sounds like the wind, apparently, but he walks up to the tail, takes his hatchet, and just cuts the tail off of whatever it's attached to. He hears a loud yelp from the bushes, and it takes off. And he's like, oh, okay, that ended well. Now he has like this, I don't know, let's say it's like a 2-foot-long tail, still kind of squirming and squirting blood in the bushes. And he's like, I'm just gonna eat this right here. I'm just gonna eat it whole. So he picks up the tail, and he opens his mouth. He's swallowing the tail whole, and dude, I'm just like, take your time, Hermit. Hermit. Just, okay, breathe through your nose. Breathe. Yeah, there you go. Is that better? The Hermit nods. The Hermit nods as he's breathing through his nose. Swallows the whole tail. The dogs are like, what the hell just happened? We wanted some of that. Hermit's like, yeah, you wouldn't like that. It was disgusting, but I was super hungry. So they go home. That night, Hermit's laying in bed, and he hears a voice. He hears a voice in his dark bedroom. I don't know if he had a bedroom, because he's Hermit, so it might just been a one-room shack, but anyways, he hears a voice. And the voice says, Tailipo, Tailipo, who has my Tailipo? I'm glad I'm a camp counselor at a fire now. That is what my life has become. The Hermit's like, oh my god, he totally like freaks out. He wakes up, there's a huge black cat. It's the size of a dog. It's just what I described at the beginning of the story. Standing at the foot of his bed, looking at his stomach, and is like, Tailipo, Tailipo. And the Hermit goes, that's weird, I thought that was your name, and that wasn't what was in my stomach, and the cat looks confused for a second. Hermit calls in his dogs, and Tailipo jumps out the window, assuming he has a window, again, because he's a hermit. Tailipo walks to the front door, opens it, and leaves, and the dogs chase after him. And the Hermit's like, oh man, that was close. I don't know what that thing was. Eventually, the dogs come back, but only 2 of them come back. And he's like, that's not good. Luckily, I didn't really like that dog that much, so whatever. He goes to bed. Later that night, he hears the door open again. He's like, uh-oh. Tailipo, Tailipo, who has my... And he's like, dogs, get him! Like, he's totally freaking out. And the dogs chase Tailipo back out of the cabin. Dude's freaking out. Only 1 dog comes back. And the dog that didn't come back, that was his favorite dog. Now the Hermit is actually feeling sad. He's kind of left with the milquetoast dog, the dog he didn't like. He's like, damn it. But he's trying to go back to sleep for whatever reason, why he just didn't stay guard or lock his door at this point. Tailipo shows back up, repeats his phrase, Tailipo, Tailipo. The Hermit sends the dog after him, you get the point. This time, the last dog doesn't come back. And even though the Hermit didn't like that dog, it was at least his last form of protection. The Hermit stays up with his hatchet and his shotgun, and is hiding under the covers. And he hears the door open again, and Talipo comes back in, jumps on the man, disarms him. They're wrestling over the shotgun. First round goes off. Wrestling. Second round goes off. Talipo takes the shotgun, unloads it, dismantles it, throws it in the corner like Jason Bourne. And then he just knocks the hatchet away. He's like, no, he disassembles the hatchet too. He's like, turns it into a bunch of splinters. And then Talipo crawls on top of the hermit. I'm not gonna say my phrase again. The hermit's like, I don't have your Talipo. And Talipo looks at him and says, yes, you do. And then begins ripping his stomach apart with his long claws. Now, I want to take a point to remind you that this story is often repeated in a book of scary stories for children. It is actually based on a real tale from the olden times in the Appalachians. But because it has a cat, because it says the same thing over again, and it has like this numerical like countdown, they've made it for kids, but there's two original versions. One, Talipo rips his guts out, shreds him, pulls his bloody, half-digested tail out of the hermit's stomach, and then looks at the camera and says, now I have my Talipo. As the man slowly bleeds out, I imagine that Talipo just left his body there, and the wounds were bad, but it wasn't an instant death. So he laid there for probably about 10 to 12 hours, bleeding and screaming as the stomach acid was kind of dissolving his own skin. But actually what killed him was exposure, because Talipo left the door open, and it was the dead of winter. That's not a good story to tell your kids. Now, I don't think the camp counselor goes on, then in the third hour, he was still in agony as the stomach acid spilled all... No, they probably leave that part out. But there's another part that most versions leave out. This was the part where I was like, okay, this is the story, this is the ending that I'd want to hear. It's the same setup, but one version ends like this. Talipo jumps on the bed, disarms the man, and says, you have my Talipo. And then he sodomizes the hermit. Now, that's definitely left out of the children's version, because everyone would be like, what's sodomize? And he's like, oh, the camp counselor is like, uh-oh. Should have read this other version. But in one tale of the story, whoever invented this idea is like the M. Night Shyamalan of the Appalachians. You have this creature, does that mean he was sodomizing the dogs? Are the dogs like left in the forest just kind of like laying there smoking cigarettes? They're like, that was actually kind of fun. You don't knock until you try it, right? And the other dog's like, yeah, that was quite amusing. And then Talipo sodomizes his hermit. Now, I'm gonna have to say this, just to get this out here. I'm neither furry nor gay, but if a sentient, anthropomorphic, demonic cat appeared out of nowhere and wanted to have sex with me, I'm down. Like, you can't pass that up. Like, that's not a bad ending to that story. That's nowhere near as bad as bleeding out and dying of exposure, or being eaten, having your guts ripped out by a cat looking for his tail. If the ending of the story is the cat simply sodomizing you, and then you live, you're just smoking a cigarette with your dogs, and you're like, that was surprisingly fun. I'll take that ending, 100%, because you live. I mean, here's a pro tip from an old-time bachelor. You can only bang so many baristas. At a certain point, if an anthropomorphic, human-sized, intelligent, evil cat showed up at my doorstep and was like, hey, I saw you on Tinder. I don't know, I don't think I'm gonna pass that up. I don't think I'm gonna pass it. Plus, if I did, it would probably just rip my guts out. But, you know, at a certain point, that story is far more intriguing than just getting your guts ripped out. That's the story of Talipo. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a little bit about me in the process. Let's go ahead and move on to our next story. Okay, so we got Talipo out of the way. Smoking a cigarette. We're oddly relaxed. A little sore, but not as much as we thought. Not as much as we thought we'd be. But it's time to get back to work. Flick the cigarette to the side. Unfortunately, we're in the Appalachians and it's dry now and everything goes up in flames. But that's actually perfect, because what we're going to do is we're going to use the burnt out forest as a landing pad. Somehow I can whistle. A carpenter copter shows up, because we got a long journey ahead of us. We're leaving the Appalachians, and to be totally fair, I don't know where those are at. I think they're somewhere around the East Coast. It's like a hillbilly country. I think it's like higher up in Tennessee, something like that. I don't know. Anyways, we hop in the carpenter copter. We're going to Brazil. Now, I have a lot of listeners in Brazil, and I have a few friends in Brazil. I want to say this up front, guys. All the information I have about the water quality in Brazil is strictly from news articles that I've read. If I'm wrong, let me know. I'm not trying to say Brazil has the dirtiest water in the world. However, the water supply in certain parts of Brazil, especially Rio, will play a part in this story. So we're on the Carpenter Copter. We are flying over the Atlantic, I think, headed down to Brazil. Now, while we're there, we want a little in-flight entertainment, right? So I go, hey guys, I got this DVD. I got this DVD of this SpongeBob episode. just one SpongeBob episode. You're looking at me like, why would you have a DVD of just one? Oh no, don't worry about it. Here, I'll put it in and you watch it. But you might want to like sit to where your kind of butt is hanging over the side of the copter. You're like, what? What's going on here? And before you can answer a question or move to the side of the helicopter, I start the DVD. Now this is a SpongeBob episode. On the Carpenter Copter, we have, in particular, we got all of you guys, but we got Romantis Anon, and we got Marcus Atius Virilis. Both of them personally requested the SpongeBob SquarePants story you're about to hear. They both are smart, and they are leaning their butts off the side of the copter. I know you're still questioning whether or not you should, but please do that. Seriously, right now, hurry up, the episode's starting. And they both hit me up on YouTube to request this, so I wanted to give a shout out to them. So, helicopter. Okay, that noise will make sense in a little bit. But as the helicopter lands, we land at an airport in Brazil. Very, very messy. Security guards come up. They're not only holding their guns, they're also holding their noses because of the smell. So, SpongeBob SquarePants defecation Brazilian broadcast is the conspiracy theory we're going to be talking about today. It sounds like a bunch of words thrown together, and it most likely is. It most likely is just what we call word soup, where someone picked the funniest words and put them in a phrase. However, but what it is, the theory is this, is that there was an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants where when Brown Note, the Brown Note is a, as far as I know, it's mythical, that it doesn't actually exist. But the Brown Note is apparently a sound frequency that causes you to poop your pants. That's why they call it the Brown Note. They've done a lot of stuff on it. South Park's done an episode on it. Mythbusters did an episode on it. But the conspiracy theory is that there was an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants that had weird visual imagery and Squidward singing, because Squidward plays the flute or the clarinet. And he played a Brown Note in the show, and it made a bunch of kids in Brazil have poop their pants. However, it wasn't just that. It was that they pooped out half their body weight. Most of these kids in one sitting just 4 pounds of poop. Just watching the episode of SpongeBob and you're sitting there and you're eating your goldfish crackers and you're like, how long would I have to make that noise to equal 4 pounds? A lot. That would be a long noise. That would be like a loop I would have to do. So, for a second there, I was thinking, maybe I should try to do it for 4 pounds. But anyways, so that's a conspiracy theory. Now, the question is this. We have a couple questions about that. One, did it really happen? And two, why? So, as far as did it really happen, it's on the conspiracy iceberg, but that doesn't mean anything as far as the conspiracy itself being true. We can't say for sure that it 100% happened. There's no proof. The Nickelodeon never came forward. You know, there was always that thing about the Pokemon episode that was causing epileptic seizures that was shown in Japan. There's been a lot of controversy about that because kids did go to the hospital for that. Kids did have to go to the hospital for that. And the broadcaster was saying it had nothing to do with this. It was some psychosomatic mass hysteria that was going on. However, we won't show that strobe effect ever again. That strobe effect has been repeated, and we haven't had these mass epileptic seizures. Hasn't been repeated on broadcast television, but it was shown to other people because when they were trying to figure out what caused these kids to freak out, doctors and scientists and stuff like that were watching the video, and they're like, this wouldn't have caused it. There must have been something else that caused it. And the kind of consensus last I heard was that one kid probably had an epileptic fit due to it because he was epileptic, and then there's just this mass hysteria thing going on where other kids are just like, I don't feel good, mommy, and that got wrapped up in this whole thing. So, could Squidward have hit the brown note and made a bunch of kids poop 4 pounds of poop in a heartbeat and end up in the hospital? We don't see any news like we did with the Pokemon of a mass amount of